Well, I finally did it. I took a look at the entire original Silent Hill series, 1 through 4. I didn't take a look at anything after 4 except for the remake of 2, which pretty much is mostly a shot-for-shot remake of 2 in terms of story, in regard outside of some extended levels and stuff that I don't think really needed to be there. We're going to be talking about the story. We've already talked about the first one, and after taking a look at 2 through 4, including the 2 remake, I still believe that the first one is still my favorite. But for now, let's talk about the Silent Hill series and the movie. I now have a newfound understanding of why Pyramid Head and the nurses look the way that they do, but the Gillespies are still here. They changed her name from Cheryl to Sharon, and there's a lot of things different about this. This one combines the story of the first 3 games into one mishmash that's the story that is mostly the first game story, but with elements of the other 2 things sprinkled in, because we have to have this guy for some reason. You know, they had the lore of this franchise outside of this film is fascinating to me, but at the same time, a lot of it I don't know why it exists outside of, oh, the first game was popular, we need to make sequels. And so they just expanded upon things. Characters feel like they're shoo-ins, because the story in the first game kind of does end with a sense of finality to it. Cheryl gets reincarnated, so as to say. Harry leaves the town with Cheryl, Sybil surviving as player determinants. For me, she survived, and they get to run off with their happy ending. That's my ending of Silent Hill 1, and I prefer that ending over any other. Silent Hill 2 feels like a side story. It feels like you could have changed the name Silent Hill to some other place, like some Massachusetts ghost town or something, and nothing would have changed. You just changed the names, and it's still a psychological horror-esque type of story with psychological elements brought in. The whole fog and the otherworld stuff doesn't really make as much sense. I had to read a certain companion book piece written by added in by the people of Team Silent that came out with the 3rd entry, Silent Hill 3. There was a novel called The Book of Lost Memories. I found a translated version of this to read that explains more things about what they did and why they did it in 2 and 3, primarily, since I don't believe Owaku was part of the first one in regards to writing the whole thing out. It was somebody else, to my knowledge. I don't know everybody's names. I know Owaku's name, just because his name. I know Akira Yamaoka. I know his name because I love the music in this franchise. I will say this, even up to entry 4, the music is fantastic. It is absolutely great, incredible. I got a newfound interest in bands like 9 Inch Nails because of Silent Hill. It is fantastic. So Akira, you are fantastic with this stuff. And I really wish you made more industrial rock type of music. Get some more vocalists on. It's so good. 2 and 3 are so good with those vocal tracks. Man. Alright. But that second title, and the remake does look beautiful. It does look beautiful. There's some hiccups here and there with the remake, but what can you do? You can't be perfect. Facial features can't be perfect, even though it's 2024, and there's other games that have done this facial features perfectly since 2013. But hey, I'm not judging. The facial features are fine, except for Lara's face. There's this in the scene where James finally tells Laura that he's responsible for Mary's death. Laura's face kind of like it kind of freezes up. I don't see the shock and the outrage and the pain on her face, facial features wise, as strongly as it should have been. Vocal wise, voice acting wise, everything's great. Everything's great in that. And it was really good in the second game. And of course, this franchise is all about theories. We have to have theories this, theories that, this, that, this, that. And that's one thing that I did read about in the Book of Lost Memories, is that a lot of these things were kept vague-ish on purpose for the point of player interpretation, so that the player can interpret things and see and make their own deductions and find their own clues and figure out the mystery of Silent Hill on their own. And I can appreciate that. I really can. To me, something about Silent Hill and dreams seems to like go hand in hand. Dreams, if you think about it, in the first game, Harry has a car crash. He wakes up in his car. He's unconscious. In Silent Hill 2, James wakes up in his car at the end of the game. And that's in the in-water ending. James wakes up in his car. It's like a semblance of waking up from where you passed out, so as to say. In Silent Hill 3, Heather's asleep in the diner, cafe, in the mall, or whatever, and then she wakes up at the end of the game in the cafe, to my knowledge. In the fourth one, of course, Henry's asleep in his bed, and then he wakes up in his bed. Silent Hill has a very dream world-esque aura about it. I wouldn't so much say that people are physically going there, but you can physically die there. But how do you die? It's a little here and there. 4 kind of messes up with the lore a big way too much. 3 is a direct sequel to the first game, and I do appreciate that one a lot, but so many plot points in 3 just feel like they're being shoehorned in. They're being forced into an already completed puzzle. The puzzle was complete by the first game. You didn't really need to revisit Harry Mason. You didn't really need to visit Alessa Gillespie. You didn't really need to visit the cult. So we introduce Claudia and Vincent. Vincent's apparently the dude that was business savvy. He expanded the cult outside of Silent Hill into other towns and cities and other nations even. He went global with this thing. And he was very market savvy and how to expand it. He was very much a materialistic man too. He didn't want the world to end. And of course Claudia is the typical zealot. She is completely lost in this thing, and there's no saving her mind. She is completely fallen down the rabbit hole of this cult, and I can't really understand how this happens to people, but it does. It happens to people. People fall down these things, and it's just whatever. But there's no saving Claudia. But both of these characters feel like they're being forced into a narrative that doesn't even need to exist. And they kill off Harry because of course they do. Why shouldn't they kill off Harry? You know, in my personal opinion, you could have changed the detective, old guy, to Harry, and have Harry being contacted by the cult wanting the kid, and he's like saying no, 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 but they track him down, find Heather through him, and then he's like the supporting character. I would have personally preferred that. You know, keep Harry alive. He's the best character in this franchise, in my personal opinion. I like him the best out of all 4 of the protagonists. You know, Heather's great. She really is great. She responds to a lot of things in really great ways. But She's got nothing on Harry Mason. Harry is perfect. James is a very sympathetic character, and like I said, dreams. Most of the time when you're not lucid dreaming, you don't really realize you're asleep. You don't really realize that you're dreaming. You kind of walk through the motions to the narrative of that dream, which is what I think was happening to James throughout most of Silent Hill 2. He didn't wake up. He's not awake. He's not lucid dreaming. So he's under the control of the dream. The dream is controlling him. He's not really realizing that he is awake. Same thing for Eddie and Angela. They both are dreaming. They don't feel like... and they're lost. The dream has taken control of them, if that makes sense. That's my theory, at least. What else? And, Heather-wise, she definitely does realize she's dreaming in a lot of ways. She definitely realizes the other world's not necessarily supposed to be there. The whole demon thing being back in Heather's body again for some reason. How did it get there? Reasons? I read the Book of Lost Memories, and even that doesn't explain what the heck is going on in 3, or why the heck 3 is even a thing. It's just rehashing the first game again. They're just trying to do that again. And she's got to say, will you stop it? And then she gets rid of them. And then they're probably going to be back in another game to try again. And then we got to get rid of them again. And then they're going to be back in another game. And we got to get rid of that sect. And then, the Tokyo branch is getting involved. We got to get them out of there. It's just like a global extermination of this cult. Go ahead. Why not? I don't... Yeah, it was fascinating in the first game. It really was. This cult and all this stuff. It was very fascinating. And the second game was very removed from the first game, enough so that it didn't feel like it was shoehorning things into the first game's narrative. It was trying to tell its own story, even though it was kind of messing with the lore a little bit of the first game, because, to my knowledge, the first game was Alessa's nightmare. Harry was walking into Alessa's nightmare. The other world was her nightmares taking control of her and interacting physically with the world around Harry. And I found that to be very fascinating. But in 2, it is the nightmares of the characters that the town is drawing in, but the town should still be there, right? The town of Silent Hill, like outside of James, Eddie, Angela, and whoever else, Lara, is in this town, in the game. There's a town, like the real waking world town. People live there, right? These 4 characters, Lara generally doesn't see anything bad, but these other 3 characters, while their crimes can be a little bit extreme, there is a lot of guilt, there is a lot of pain that a lot of other characters can tend to feel. Like, they tend to feel a lot of guilt and pain and all that stuff. So why is it the town using its own citizenry as the fuel of the nightmares and all this stuff? Because, like, say we have Larry, the gas station man, who has been embezzling money from the gas company and has about, I don't know, $300,000 over the course of 20 to 30 years, and he plans to leave Silent Hill with his spirited away money to go start a better life for himself elsewhere with his embezzled money. And then what if Silent Hill brings Larry, the gas station attendant, into the nightmare world? Why isn't he in there? And what about Bob, the store clerk at the gun shop, who has been acquiring a bunch of these guns through a little bit of an illegal means because he wants to cut corners and get them shipped to his store a little bit quicker? maybe he's feeling a little bit guilty about that. So why isn't Bob the gun store clerk in this town? Like, there's a lot of even more common feelings of guilt, like Johnny, the 15-year-old high schooler who has been cheating on his exams the past few years, and he feels a little bit guilty about being praised for being this whiz kid when he's been leeching off of his best friend, the nerdy kid, Jerry, for the past couple of years. And what about that guilt? Why isn't he in this nightmare world? Like, isn't there a real world, Silent Hill? Don't people live there? There's a ton of people out there who harbor common guilt and pain that you could leech on without drawing these other people into the town. But of course, if these 30 characters weren't drawn to Silent Hill, we wouldn't have a Silent Hill 2 to begin with. I get that, but maybe make a little bit more of a sensingness about the town and the real world aspects of it. Now, I believe the games take place in a sort of 70s, 80s, 90s era, like a pre-easy access internet era, maybe. Maybe you don't know. Maybe Silent Hill, it's very, very complicated. It's all theory and conjecture, of course. I'm trying to make sense of how just these three get drawn into this place. Were they in the nearby suburbs? Why these three? What's their connection? It's like, what about all these other thousands of people? What about them? And then I got to thinking, well, maybe those other thousands of people are getting involved in this thing. Maybe James and Eddie and Angela is just Wednesday night's nightmare, and Thursday night's nightmare is Larry the gas station attendant, Bob the gun store clerk, and Jody the promiscuous teen with guilt about cheating other people and all that stuff. Maybe those three are tomorrow night's nightmare. I don't know. But given that premise and given that theory of mine, you could infinitely make infinite sequels, but then they'd get a little bit more formulaic after a while. So I have no idea how 2 even exists in this narrative in this way, how you could even justify it, because it's clearly not just these 3 people who harbor all of this pain, and the town is leeching off of other people's pains. They're bringing other people in, so maybe Thursday night's nightmare is other people. James is just today's victim, he was able to get away. And 3, of course, I talked about how everything feels shoehorned in. Like, the story is a direct sequel to the first one, which I do appreciate, because 2 was kind of confusing and like a dramatic veer to a different direction entirely, or it's a separate road, just merging only slightly and then taking its own path again. But 3 is a direct sequel to the first game, even though I feel like almost everything in it is just being shoehorned in. It's just being forced into the narrative, and I don't know why it's there. It's a good game. It's a decent narrative, but I don't know why this narrative even needs to be here, if that makes sense. And then we get the 4th one, The Room. The Room is interesting. The Room is fascinating. And at the same time, The Room is breaking so much lore beyond any belief. The connection to Silent Hill is this orphanage that the cult is running that is absolutely pure evil. This cult is pure evil. And at this point, they have become cartoonish, mustache twirler, evil people. But and you deal with a serial killer dude who is completely fallen into this cult, who was one of these orphanage kids who was brainwashed into this nightmare hell cult, And he grows up to want to sacrifice an X amount of characters, an X amount of people, in order to revive his deity. And let's talk about the deities and the cults and what exactly Silent Hill is, or what it used to be. In the Book of Lost Memories, Owaku says that he took ideas spiritually from Christianity, Aztec mysticism, and Japanese folklore, and he combined the three into a sort of its own spiritual fulcrum to make a cult out of those ideas. The region of Silent Hill, before the immigrants came here, the colonists came here, was a very spiritual place to the natives. The natives worshipped this place as a sacred spiritual place, and there was a lot of power here. And then the colonists came and they built a town here, and all sorts of stuff started to happen after the evils of humanity started to corrupt this spiritual place. And over time, the spiritual energy of this place turned into the very faiths that these peoples brought with them. The theory of a self-fulfilling prophecy, if that makes sense. Their deity is a self-fulfilling prophecy. It was created by this cult. This cult imagined him, and due to the energies of the region of Silent Hill, their thoughts gave birth to the very deity that they worship. And because the deity now exists, because of their belief in it in this region, it further intensifies it. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy loop type of thing. So that's why that exists. Although I kind of like what the movie here does, in that it kind of is like Centralia, Pennsylvania. This is what this movie's version of Silent Hill does to the town, is that there is a coal mine fire, and the coal runs under the town, and this town has been burning, the coal has been burning for the past 40 some odd years, so all of the people have been forced to vacate the town. It literally is a ghost town. And our characters come to this town and go into the dream world Silent Hill and find that there are some survivors of that initial cataclysm, and you find out that Alessa caused the cataclysm to happen. From all of the cultingness and all that stuff, she trapped these people here to punish them and all that good stuff. It's a really interesting story, and I do like how it combines elements of 2 and 3 into this first story, in the first game's installment. I do wish, though, that Harry Mason was the main parent trying to rescue the daughter. That's what I wish there. Harry Mason does deserve his due. He deserves his just rewards. Justice for Harry Mason. All that good stuff. But the town itself, all of the people are gone, right? That's what I like, because that way it makes sense for why it needs to draw people to the town after the Alessa's nightmare is taken care of, because there's nobody here. That's why it's drawing people to the town. That I can understand. That makes sense to me. Ultimately, we could spend hours and hours theorizing and making symbols out of all of these things. We could spend all that time just on the second entry, and of course I could just talk about this one right here. Pyramid Head is essentially the embodiment of the id. There's the id, ego, and super ego, and then there's the anima and the animus. The animus is the male embodiment of the male spirit in the female psyche. The anima is the embodiment of the female spirit in the male psyche. For example, if in James's mind, in his dream world, his spiritual feminine the anima, basically turns into Mary because he's been wanting her there, and because of the spiritualness of the Silent Hill and all of its plot MacGuffinness, the anima is able to physically manifest in Mary's shape for James. And so that takes care of the anima. The id is the embodiment of a lot of subconscious wants. That's the Psychology 101 definition. The id is a want. It's the base, primal wants and unconscious things. But if you get a little bit more technical with it, you go a little bit more deeper into the id can also represent guilt. The manifestation of James's guilt and his desire to be punished for what he has done creates the Pyramid Head, and the Pyramid Head ends up putting James into a loop. It will continuously try to kill Maria over and over, and James doesn't seem to realize that each time Maria dies, there's another Maria, and he doesn't seem to realize, and that's why I said he's dreaming. That's why I'm saying that it feels like he's in a dream world, that he has not woken up until near the end of the game. Near the end of the game, when he realizes what he has done, he has now essentially entered the lucid state within the dream world. That is why he can look at Pyramid Head and realize what this creature represents and what it is manifested into in his own dream world. And he says this creature has no power over him anymore, he has no need for it anymore, and so Pyramid Head goes away. These creatures eventually fall over and die once he also loses need for them as well. All of these things are manifestations of James's own psyche, and that's the same with all of the monsters and creatures in the first Silent Hill. They were manifestations of Alessa's psyche. And the third one is a little bit harder to explain, but from the Book of Lost Memories, they say that this is probably Claudia's manifestations from Claudia's own psyche. And it's a little bit of a stretch, but okay. I don't know how, but this character is a new character for this third installment that you're kind of shoehorning in, so you can make up whatever you want with her. But either way, if I had to rank the 4 Silent Hill games, I would say that the first one remains my favorite. It is a fantastic story. It is self-encapsulated, meaning you could play the first one and it wraps everything up. You don't really need to play 2, 3, or 4 because 1 wraps everything up. It has a sense of finality to it that you don't really need anything more after that game. It is a very good encapsulated story in that manner. So the first Silent Hill is my favorite, even though I hate tank controls. I had that first person button that I could use, and that's what I used. In second place would have to be Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill 2, even though I feel is a complete sidetrack from this story, from this lore, and 3 gets back on track a little bit more. 2 is a good story. It's just a plain good story. While I don't really think Eddie and Angela really need to be in James's story, because it kind of feels like he's being drawn into other people's stories when it's supposed to be just about his story. I don't know why Angela is even there. She doesn't interact with anybody else. She only interacts with James. Maybe Angela is and her open self-deletionness about her is what's connected to James's own self-deletion notions, and like the in water ending. And if you don't know what that is, then that's where James commits self-deletion. So that's probably why Angela's there. Eddie is a more violent character, and James does have more subconscious violent tendencies. I mean, take a look at Pyramid Head here. So there is more of that too. So maybe that we could justify why Eddie and Angela are there, but it's still ultimately a decent story. There's a reason for this to be here. Silent Hill 3 just feels like it's just there to be a sequel to the first game, but it does put things back on track to the characters from the first game. Even though, if you ask me, I don't feel like we needed to revisit the first game's characters, really. I feel like that story wrapped itself up pretty well. Maybe you could have made this an anthological series. 1, 2, and 4 definitely do feel like anthological, separate stories. Maybe 3 could have just been another anthological, separate story, instead of being directly after the first game. But still, Heather is a very enjoyable character, and Vincent is an enjoyable character. Claudia is a decent villain. The game is well made. Everything looks good. It's very well put together. The graphics hold up really well. It's just an all-around good, solid experience as a video game. As a plot, I feel like it's the third week. It's in third place out of these 4. And of course, the fourth one is The Room. I've talked about The Room the least. I do think it's a very interesting concept. I'm not exactly a fan of the limited inventory idea. The first 3 games didn't really have that. The fourth game introduces this, so you're going to be filling up your inventory and backtracking back through the hole in the wall to get back to your room to put stuff into your storage container. You're going to go back in, you're going to fill up again, you're lots of resource management going on. And if you're a pack rat like me, you're going to be irritated. You're going to be irritated with all of this back and forth. It's just irritating. But it's also an interesting premise. It's an interesting story. But it kind of does drag after, say, the halfway point in the story. It kind of drags. And at that point, I kind of lost interest in the story and the whole Sullivan character and the cult and all this stuff. I'm like, come on, let's get on with it. Let's go. And, Sullivan's an interesting character. The orphanage is an interesting concept. It's a very evil place, but it is also where they recruit new members by brainwashing the children into the cult. And that's how they get people to fall into this thing, is that they lock out all other points of view until they have successfully brainwashed them into this thing. They get them young, they brainwash them, they show them their cult and their views, and they shove that into their little spongy heads until that's all they got in their head when they grow up. And then they get to go out and do things after having already had that thing been cemented into their heads. But it's still, I don't know why it's here. I don't know why that story is there. What does it have to do with 1, 2, and 3? Why are these spooky supernatural things still happening? How does Sullivan have this thing? Is it he's supposed to be dead? But no, apparently the Sullivan that died was one of his victims instead, but he's technically also dead too, maybe? It's very, very confusing for the sake of being confusing at this point, and that kind of went from intriguing to irritating to exhausting. But at least the first 3 games are interesting. The fourth one is interesting just from a premise point of view. I would if you're solely interested in playing, if you're extremely interested in playing it, you can always go onto GOG, Great Old Games website. 4 is on there for $9.99. Go ahead and check it out for yourself. But if you want my personal recommendation, I recommend the first game, Silent Hill 1. Even though it looks the most dated, it's still the first one. It's a perfect encapsulated story. You could play it on the PlayStation 3's PSN under the PS1 Classics. You're not going to be able to find it by just searching under games and going to PS1 Classics. You're going to have to go into the search bar and type in Silent Hill, and you'll find it there as a PS1 Classic that you could pick up for, I believe, $5.99 or $6.99. It's very low. It's certainly cheaper than buying the game hard copy, unless you just really want to do that. But Silent Hill 1 was the best one for me, then 2, then 3, then 4. It was just diminishing returns each time they made a new installment to me. And I don't know if I'm going to continue to have that opinion with the next titles that they made. Origins, Homecoming, Downpour. If my opinion of this franchise remains the same, of diminishing returns, then it's going to be diminishing each time. From what I understand, Konami stopped making these games internally after the fourth installment, so each next installment is made by a Western studio. They gave it to a Western studio to make, and the only one I think that was still involved to a degree was Akira Yamaoka for the music, and that's about it. But I do like one thing about Downpour is that Korn makes a song for it, and it was really good. I really like that song. But we may talk about those at another time. This is just me rambling about the first 4 Silent Hill games and what I thought about them. I still like the first one the best.